Hello, good afternoon, students. Welcome to another lecture here, which is titled Tribal Situation in India, Part 2. Well, this is one of the subject areas of sociology, and there are so many aspects that concerns with tribal situation in India. In the last lecture, I had dealt with some of the aspects of this topic. If I can recall them, I had already discussed something on the definitions and those aspects related to the definitions and related aspects also. But I will try to just review some of them by recapitulating the points that I had discussed once. And then we'll try to switch on to some other topics that I had not dealt with. Well, this can go on even to part 3 or 4 because there are so many aspects to be dealt with. But before I go to the main discussion of today, let's try to review some of the points that we had discussed, or where some passing references had been made in the last lecture. One is, of course, the definition of tribe, scheduled tribe. We know the differences of the two and some features of the tribe. I think I have dealt enough with that, so we'll not touch that one again. But now today, I think we can talk about this geographical distribution of tribes in India. Then we can also talk about the linguistic affinities and then the racial affinities. Then we can also talk about the economic part or the tribal professions. Now in India, this classification of geographical distribution is made by different people, different anthropologists and sociologists. So we cannot just give just one classification. But this is just to let us enhance our knowledge of where are the tribals found in India. In other words, just to map the tribal belts in India, we need to know some of the areas of concentration of tribal population in India. So one that would help us to understand is that we can name Central India, which comprises the largest population of the tribals in India. Even when we talk about the Central India, we can also divide the Central India into 2-3 parts. Some would like to just give it to Western India also, and also the eastern part of India, for example, West Bengal. And if we talk of the western side, and we can name, say, Gujarat, Maharashtra, even Rajasthan for that matter. So they can be split up into 2-3. But for now, for our understanding, let's just consider Central India comprising of all those from West Bengal to Maharashtra or Gujarat, and so on and so forth, including even, say, Goa for that matter. Then we have the second, zone. We can keep it. We can understand as certain part of India. It includes so many states, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, and even some parts of Orissa and Bihar, or even Chhattisgarh for that matter, some parts of Chhattisgarh, and even some parts of Jharkhand, because of some, racial affinities and even linguistic affinities. Some would like to divide them into southern and central parts, central belts. Then the third one will be, say, northeast region of India. There we find quite a good concentration of tribal population, and we have about, say, 7 states there, where all the states have been, have been identified as with much tribal population. And if we include Sikkim in that region, we have 8 states, and Sikkim has also a good population of tribals. And we can also take the northern part of India, say Himachal Pradesh, then UP, and Uttarakhand, and some of those areas. But some would like to include them in the north and northeastern region of tribal belt. So these are, anyway, some of the rough maps that we can understand. We know where they are found, and it can be divided into 3 belts, 4 belts, 5 belts, even 6, 7 belts, according to one's convenience. So when we talk about these racial affinities and linguistic affinities, one would like to use these belts to classify the concentrations with affinities. And when we talk of racial affinities, we are talking about the physical, appearances, characteristics, features. And also when we talk of physical appearances, we are also talking about the genotypes, the genes, the internal, basis of, manifesting our features in the physical forms. For example, some people have dark skins, some people have curly hairs, some people have sharper noses, and even the noses are shorter or wider, and even the physical features, the hairs, some are more hairy than others, some are almost hairless in their bodies. And of course there are so many characteristics even in the eye form, in the eye fold, and even in the eyebrows, and even in the in the facial characteristics, apart from other, besides other features. So these are real physical, but and anthropologists use these physical characteristics to classify race into 3, 4 racial classifications, groups in the world. But in India, if we talk of the tribals, we can classify them into 3 racial elements. One would be of the Negrito elements, those tribals who have, that Negroids characteristics. And these people will find mainly in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Not all of them, but most of the Nicobar and Andaman Islanders, like the Ongis, Jarawas, and others, they belong to this group of people. Then the second one will be people with the Proto-Australoid affinities. This group belongs to those, groups in certain part of India and in some parts of central India also. And the third one will be the Mongoloids. The Mongoloids, as you know, are found mainly in the northeast, and apart from the northeast, we hardly find these Mongoloid people in India. Of course, in some of the border areas of Nepal, there could be some, but they are not much. So when we talk of Mongoloids, we are talking about the northeast tribals. So these three racial affinities or racial affinities and strains are found in India. Now, along with this, we can also talk about their linguistic affinities, their languages, their linguistic groups. And again, we have three linguistic groups that have been identified by anthropologists and sociologists. One would be those speaking the Sino-Tibetan languages. When we talk of Sino-Tibetan languages, we're talking of even the Tibetan Chinese languages. And if we break down that further, there are so many groups again. It may be, say, Tibeto-Burman, Tibeto-Bodo-Burman, and so on and so forth. And these languages are spoken mainly by the northeastern tribals. And the second one will be those groups speaking Austric or Monhammer, or it is also called Gol or Munda type of linguistic groups. And they are spoken by tribes like the Mundas, the Sandalis, and also some tribes in the northeast, by coincidence or whatever, they have relationships in terms of linguistic affinities. They are the Khasis, tribes in the Chindian, in Meghalaya. So their language, their linguistic roots are same. So this group is called the Austric-speaking people, or the Gol or Munda group of language, or also it is also called Monhamar language group. And the third one is identified as Dravidian linguistic group. And these are spoken mainly by southern tribals in India, and also extending up to the, say, southern part of Middle India, which means southern part of central India that we were talking about earlier. And we can name, say, few tribes so that we understand even in central India there are some linguistic differentiations. And we can name, say, the Orans. The Orans, apart from their surroundings, speak Dravidian language. They belong to the Dravidian group of people. And this is one example, which is like, unlike the Mundas or Sandalis, their language is different. So some would like to call it the southern part of central India. Well, I think that's enough for this linguistic affinities to start with. Now we can also talk about tribal economy. Last time I think we did not discuss on this, but some passing references might have been made. Tribal economy, if we talk of today, some would not, some would find it difficult to understand, because the kind of economy that people are having, the tribals are having today, will be, different or very different from what they had in the past. Some in the past, because of their economic system, some would like to classify them as primitive kind of economy, even including hunting, food gathering, and cattle herding and all that. Of course, some of them are still there, but we can start with the kind of hunting and fishing, for example. It is there, but it does not form their own main economy, except if they are located in the sea beach or surrounded by the seas and rivers. And they have another economy is cattle rearing. No, before that also we can also name food gatherers. These food gatherers may be gathering the fruits, plants, eatable plants, and also even gathering, collecting honeybees and some eatable items that would give them survival, let them survive. So these were also once a part of the, their economy that made them survive. Even today, some tribes still do it, but it becomes like a kind of forms supplementary food, or if not, a kind of entertainment on their part. And there are gatherer herders also, pastoral tribal groups. They are found, very much found in various parts of India, mainly in the northern belt, and also, of course, in southern belt also. For example, say among the Gujars and Gadis of Himachal Pradesh, they have this kind of pastoral and cattle herding economy. And if we go down to the Nilgiri Hills, if we take, say, the Toda tribals, the Todas, they also they are well known for this cattle rearing economy. So they are well spread in India, they are found in India. Then we can come to another level of economy, which is, say, cultivation. Cultivation can be of various types. It can include shifting cultivation, and in tribal world, different names are there. So we did not go through different names, indigenous names, but let's just know it by what we call shifting cultivation or jhum cultivation. And also it is called Sweden type of cultivation. So they are known in different names, but they're just the same. And we have other agricultural kind of cultivation. And one well-known type of cultivation is, and which is much found in various parts of tribal world in India, is shifting, terrace cultivation. Most of you might have known in the pictures, if you have not seen personally. It's like a terrace, fields in the form of terrace, where the tribals would construct, and it has become like a traditional, it has been handed down from their forefathers, and they are still cultivating with that. And that is quite suitable for a landscape like in the hills, because the landscape of the hills would promote that. And so this is a kind of terrace cultivation, which is also found in different parts of the world, which is also well known in China, for example, in the Yunnan province. It's also well cultivated in different parts of India, and especially in the northeast. And in these anthropological and sociological studies of cultivation, we find a good example where we used to name few tribes. Of course, they are cultivated by many tribes, like, say, the Angami tribals. The Angami tribals have a very good terrace cultivation, also the Tangkhul Nagas also. And it is, when seen traveling by bus or in your own conveyance or whatever, we find besides the roads very good fields, and they're very yielding also, and they're very good at looking at those fields, and they are seen as terrace types, terrace that we have in our houses. So this is also called terraced kind of type of cultivation. Of course, it is found in various regions also. And even terrace can be of dry cultivation and wet cultivation. Sometimes it is confusing because when some people would use it wet cultivation, they would like to use it mainly for plain cultivations in the plains. So that is yet another type of cultivation. Yeah, and so the other type of cultivation will be agriculture, cultivation in the plains. Even in tribal areas, there are some plain areas where they use it for agricultural farming. And the Patani is also quite well known with terrace cultivation and also wet cultivation, plain cultivation also. And some of the tribals which are situated near the plains, habitats. So these areas also found to have used this kind of cultivation. And apart from this agriculture farming, they also have, artisans. There are so many skilled and less skilled artisans, and there are skilled laborers, skilled workers, and even including white collar job, holders and traders also. And now in the modern days we have, white collar jobs, tribals who are holding different positions in different ministries, in different departments, and in different sectors. And so these days we find lots of varieties of professions with special reference to economy. And of course, we can talk also of this tribal education vis-a-vis the employment. If we compare the kind of employment that the tribals put in, or the tribals are represented, and the kind of population that they have, we find that it is very poor. And so the government of India, through legislation, try to give opportunities to the tribals, so along with other backward classes, economic backward classes like the SCs and also OBCs nowadays, so that they are given some opportunities to come up from their from the situation that they need to be emancipated. And the kind of employment that they get somehow help them in trying to improve their way of life. So in a way it's for the betterment of their life. But there are so many educated people, educated tribals, who are unemployed, who are not employed. So this has caused lots of concern, because if we go through the employment exchange data, we find so many people lined up, and for years together the list are seen to be very, very long, and so many tribal youths, educated youths, after frustration, they resort to different types of vices, which sometimes creates lots of problems for the society itself. And some would go to some anti-people activities, deviant behaviors, and some would go for some other options that are available to them. Of course, this also remains as the choices. And this is also linked to some of the underground movements, social movements. Not all the social movements are inclusive of these frustrated youths, but there are youths who want to, get employment, and yet when they don't get it, they try to go to a place or where they can get a place. And so many movements in the Northeast, when we go to the when we interview or go deep into their life, they would say that most of them have been facing all these frustrations in their earlier life. Of course, actually, frustrated people are not the kind of not supposed to be the right kind of people, even for revolutions. But then, once they go, it is up to the person, individual, to adapt to the environment, their performances, whatever, wherever they are. It depends with the environment also, social environment. And now we can also talk about the tribes and their relationships with their land, forests, and culture. Now, the tribals are so attached to their land, and they're so attached to their forests, and so attached to culture, that land, forest, culture happen to be, a kind of deeply interlinked system. Because their love for forest, for the traditional forests, their love for traditional land becomes, tied up with their culture. Some places are used for worship. They identify certain places where they think that their ancestors were associated with. And even some trees, for example, are worshipped as part of their supernatural being. And so also the rivers, the streams, the mountains, and all the physical figures. So this kind of, land, forest, culture, and human relationship, especially for the tribals, is found to be very important, very significant. And this significance is also found in their festivals, annual festivals. In their agricultural cycle festivals, we find that the tribals gratify, the tribals also, ask blessings from the supernatural being, the spirits, to open their, to allow them to cultivate their lands to start with, or say, in order to do that, they perform rituals, maybe by the priest, head priest, or by the chief of the village, to open, for example, say, the seed sowing of the villages. And then even for, planting of the saplings, then even harvesting, and in the post-harvesting also they have, along with Thanksgiving, they enjoy with nature, and they have lots of festivals, and there is no dearth of festivals. For example, even among the Nagas, they have Ringaini, seed sowing festival, and even among the Gugis, we have Good Festival, which is post-harvest festival. And they are now, like in Manipur, these are gadgeted holidays. These days are respected, and the government has recognized these days as grand festivals of the people of Manipur. So also in different parts of the northeast and other areas also, there are so many festivals related to agriculture, farming, and their relationship with land, forest, along with culture. Now we can talk about something more about development. When we talk of development in tribal areas, we find that it is really pathetic compared to other places developed or somewhat relatively developed areas. If we sit in the metropolis like Delhi, we will not even understand the situations in different parts of the tribal world. Even if there are roads, there will be lots of bumpy roads, and even chip pepper roads are not available. Villages don't have accessible roads. And when we talk of infrastructure, they lack, most of the infrastructures that they should be having. They should be given or provided. And in a welfare state society, government country like India, they expect lots of things to be done by the state. But so far, the state is unable to provide what they want and what they need because of several reasons. Maybe some would say that it is one of the reasons would be lack of political will, and some would say that even if there is some will from the state, the middleman, people who are mediating, or the agents, maybe contractors or whatever, they spill it somewhere or they take it to themselves, and they would not really use the sanctioned budget or money for constructing good roads or giving some other infrastructural, developmental works. So, and also, of course, the local politicians and the bureaucrats and some others. I think most of them have their hands in not letting even the minimal, opportunities that could be provided. Of course, if we compare with the metropolis and some other relatively developed states or areas, India is a land of, like many countries or many countries, because in terms of development, some areas are well developed. For some areas, bombing crores of rupees will not be a problem, but for some areas, even few lakhs becomes a problem, This is a kind of disparity that we find when we look into the roadmap of development in the country. Of course, who is to blame, who is not to blame, and this is part of the, this should not be a part of a discussion today, but we can imagine how we find divisions of peoples and regions and places, in terms of developmental, milieux. Of course, connected to this development also, we have several projects like dams, which is now well known, at least in the dictionary of Indian news now. it flashes in the newspapers, but for some other projects from remote areas, these problems are not highlighted. If the newspapers it highlights only those problems in the accessible regions and areas, for example, like the Narmada region project or some other well-known, better-known projects. But like, say, in other far-flung areas, there are so many problems due to, dam constructions. And the other day I was just of course I have been reading about these dam projects also in the recent past. Even in the Manipur alone, in the state of Manipur alone, there are 2 big dams coming up. One is the Tipaimuk Dam, which is recently flooded, and the other one is Mapitel Dam, which is also known as Topal Dam. And there had been, this Topal Dam is somewhat, older, and the government had started, along with some NGOs and agents, the construction of the dam. But now the many villages that are to be affected and that have been already affected had been launching, demonstrations against demonstrations. And we keep hearing all that. And the people had some sympathy with that. And even those people who are far away from the region would also, join in their campaign. And so now even the government is in a fix. Like in the Dipaimuk case, it is being spearheaded by, NIPCO, which is one of the major agents of construction of all these dams in the northeast. And, even despite the resistance, stiff resistance by the people who are to be affected, there are so many villages that are to be affected, and even the state government had been reminded of all this, and even the scientific groups, the geologists and environmentalists had been also joining the voice of the villages that this is in a seismic zone, this is an area that cannot be used for dam construction. But despite all this, the state government and the NIPCO tried to go ahead with this. And even the Ministry of Environment find it very difficult to clear from Delhi itself, which is, like a state against a state, or, even the sender is understanding the problem of those villages who are to be affected, and also the location itself. And if once this is constructed, then it is going to affect lots of people and villages. And this has been the report after report, and they give out so many reports on this. These are development induced, exploitation of the people, of the villages, of the tribals. People like to talk about development, but the real people who are concerned, people who are living in that situation, would say, no, we don't like this, because they are to be submerged and they have to go away from their village or their place, and they are to go to a foreign place where they never know where they would land up. The government might have promised them something, this and that, but history says that most of the rehabilitations, even in different states of India like Orissa, Chhattisgarh, and even in Bihar, for that matter, and in some other parts, rehabilitation becomes a problem even for the state. Because the kind of programming that is there is not actually, gelling with the kind of problem that is to be addressed. And this has been the findings of many field researchers in different, which is known from different reports. Now, with the little time that is left now, let us talk a little bit about women or women's society in tribal world. Now, let me just give one example of women power or women's role in power sharing. Women in tribal societies are different for different tribal groups. Comparatively, I see that the northeastern tribals have some sort of, relatively, more powers and roles than people in the other counterparts. It is due to the tradition, it is also due to the environment, social environment, and also, this of the location itself. And if we talk of the Northeast, there will be some differences, but I think more or less they are comparable. Even in Naga society, for example, women are not given the, political power. And this is found in most of the tribal world, and more so in other societies in India. But there are some exceptional women who can take up roles and who can be powerful and more powerful than men itself, in a situation where there cannot be parliamentarians in the village setup or village councillors, for example. They can, manufacture, or they can have more powers than others. And one such example is what I have read and what I have seen is her Khonla of Marem is in, one of the tribes of Manipur, of Tangkhul Naga. And he is really well equipped with knowledge, a creative woman who can defeat all her male counterparts by virtue of his wisdom. And it is also recorded that when a village, Khonla's village, was invaded by 7 villagers, strong villages, she was the one who, made that village, Marem village, to conquer those 7 invading villages. And we are also told that, we also read that in any discussion in the village authority, in the village council, if there is no woman called Khonla, no settlement would be reached. That means there is no conclusion, there is no resolution that can be passed without her presence, without her saying yes. So there are some exceptional women who can will power, who has that exceptional talents. But then if we take it generally, women's status is quite lower than men in different parts of the tribal world as well. So I think for today we'll try to wrap up with this, and maybe in the next lecture we can talk more about the tribal movements and various other aspects which we have not covered today. And for today, thanks for joining the lecture, and I hope that you will I should be getting more queries from you in the next lecture. Thank you.